to my YouTube channel. So if you're new here, I aim to post weekly about psychology, careers in psychology, being an aspiring clinical psychologist and getting into clinical psychology. So if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, then please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. So today I'm going to start a new series about what can I do with a psychology degree. I think this is quite often asked by people coming to the end of their 3-year undergraduate psychology degree, and they're wondering, what can they actually go into? So today I'm going to focus on psychological wellbeing practitioners, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the background, what is a psychological wellbeing practitioner, as well as talking about how to get into being one. So first of all, thinking about the background of where a psychological wellbeing practitioner or a PWP came from. So in kind of 2007, 2008, I think, a report was produced talking about how lots of people were struggling with their mental health, and this was stopping them being able to go to work. So IAPT services kind of came around as a result of this report, and IAPT stands for Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. So the idea was to kind of make psychological therapies easier to access and, make them effective and quite quick in order for people to be able to go back into work. So that was basically where IAPT came from, and as a result of this service, they introduced a new workforce, which were the psychological wellbeing practitioners. Now, to begin with, this was in adult services. Obviously, they were talking about people not being able to work because of their mental health. And later they decided to bring this into children's services and to increase accessibility to for children to access services too. So, for example, CAMS and things like that. I think it's really important to kind of get an understanding of where the PWP came from, and thinking, critically about IAPT, and if that is something that you would like to go into. There's a big focus on creating effective short-term treatment, and whether that is something you think is effective yourself. There's kind of that, low contact, high caseload. So people who work as PWPs have a lot of cases, but often don't see them very often. And the aim is, to almost work with them as little as possible and to focus on guided self-help and self-help and kind of help the individual to help themselves. So it's definitely worth thinking about, and I'm going to link some papers down below talking about the critiques of IAPT and PWPs, as well as talking a little bit more about where IAPT came from and PWPs came from. So if it's something that you're considering, I would definitely recommend looking at them. I'll link them in the description box below. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of background into IAPT services and PWPs and where they came from. And like I said, I think it's really important to think about if this is something you really want to go into. Now, obviously, I am a trainee PWP, so I don't want it to sound like I'm putting you off at all. It's something that I do. So yeah, it's just, important to make you aware of that. And like I said, later on, they introduced the same kind of idea into children's services. Now, IAPT is kind of based on a stepped care model, which is something you might have heard about. but maybe not too sure what it is. So the idea is that at step 1, this is the lowest level of kind of, if you're struggling with your mental health problems, you might talk to a GP or a nurse about this. Then at step 2, this is for low levels of anxiety and depression, and step 3, more severe anxiety and depression and other mental health problems, and then step 4. So, you know, it kind of goes up. The idea anyway is that it's supposed to go up in terms of severity of mental health problems. Of course, that doesn't always work, and I've heard people who work as PWPs talk about working with different cases to what they're kind of told they are going to work with, which is predominantly low level anxiety and depression. And once you've kind of worked as a low intensity PWP, which is what they call it, you can then also qualify as a high intensity PWP and work in more of a step 3 system. So if you're thinking about going into being a PWP, they are generally the type of individuals that you will be working with in a step 2 model, and that goes for both adults and in children's services too. Also, as a PWP, you spend the first year as a trainee PWP, and then you are qualified after the first year. So during your first year, you are working 3 or 4 days kind of in a service, and 1 day you are at a university course. And this university course has a national curriculum, both the children's and the adults, and they kind of talk about working with people with anxiety and depression, and also talking about conduct disorders too, with a focus on kind of CBT and also a focus on social learning theory, I think too. So you'll kind of be studying and also working, which is another thing to bear in mind. Obviously, you've kind of got that university work and personal life balance to have to maintain, and like I said, it can often be quite a high volume of cases. So that is, you know, if you're thinking about being a PWP, that is kind of a brief overview of what a PWP is and what you might be working with, and kind of, you know, the kind of things that you might be doing. Like I said, there's a big focus on guided self-help and CBT. So those are likely to be the kind of techniques that you'll be working with. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how to become a PWP, as well as frequently asked questions that I've been asked quite a few times since uploading my first video on the interview process of becoming a PWP. So in order to become a PWP, the jobs are advertised on NHS Jobs. So you can type in trainee PWP on NHS Jobs, and that's where the roles are advertised, as well as typing them into Google. They're often advertised on Indeed as well. So they're the kind of places where those jobs are going to be advertised. And one of the frequently asked questions about being a PWP is kind of, do I need to apply for the university and the role separately? How does that kind of work? And the answer is, when you apply for the trainee PWP roles, that encompasses both the university course and the role that you will have in the service. For example, when I applied for my post as a trainee PWP in Children's and Young People's Services, I applied for a specific service that I was already working in, and I actually got asked after the interview if I would be interested in working for a different service if I wasn't successful in that service. So that is something to bear in mind. You don't need to worry about, you know, applying for them separately. When you apply for a PWP post, that encompasses both the course and the position in a service. Another frequently asked question is, you know, how much does it cost? And it's government funded, so it costs nothing from you. At the moment, you are paid as a band 4 initially as a trainee, and then as a band 5 when you qualify as a PWP or a cypwp. So I hope that kind of clears a little bit up about what being a PWP is, where it's come from, and kind of gives you room to think if that is something that you would really like to get into. Like I said, I link some useful papers down below about being a PWP, being a cypwp, and having a think about that. So I hope this video has been useful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye!